Have you ever heard of the jobs to be done theory? Well, basically, what it does is it shares with us what needs to happen for the customer, not what the tool should be, but what does the customer need in order for them to move forward. And it's sometimes a really important thing to understand. So I brought Tony Ulwick on the show. He's the founder and CEO of Strategyn. Great dude. And he actually taught Clayton Christensen the jobs to be done idea, the guy who's known for it. So this is the man, and he shares a lot of amazing insight about how you can better understand your customers, their needs, their challenges, and their goals. Check this out. It's going to really help.
Welcome to SaaS-Story in the Making, the podcast that features the people who made the software world what it is today and the leaders who are shaping the future of technology. Here's your host, Matt Wallach.
Yes, welcome. I am Matt. I am your host. This is SaaS-Story in the Making, where we give you strategies and tools to be able to grow and scale your company. And really exciting today, I am joined by my special guest, Tony Ulwick. Tony, how you doing?
Excellent, Matt. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to have you here. This is really cool, but I want to share with everybody who you are, Tony. So Tony is the founder and CEO of Strategyn, and really they are the pioneers of the jobs to be done theory, a powerful perspective for business leaders to better understand how they can grow. You've probably heard of jobs to be done. You may have heard of Clayton Christensen. Tony's the one who showed him how that all works. So this is really awesome. Now, in Strategyn, they have something called an outcome-driven innovation process. That's ODI, an outcome-driven innovation process. And really what it does, it employs qualitative, quantitative, and market segmentation methods that reveal hidden opportunities for growth. It's really cool. We're going to dive into a bit of that. Tony's also an inventor, an author, and an innovation thought leader. So Tony, it is a delight to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Matt, thanks for the invite. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. So tell me, what's going on with you lately and what's coming up?
Well, gosh, we've spent the last few decades working on an innovation process that's extraordinarily effective. And what we've been working on lately, and what we'll continue to work on, is making that process more accessible to people so they can actually use it. Whenever you're creating a new process, the first thing is you got to test it, refine it, rework it. The innovation process, as you might guess, pretty complicated. So it's taken us a number of years to work out all the bugs. But I started about maybe 6-7 years ago. Companies would ask us if they could install it, basically. Can we make ODI our innovation process? So we've been working for years to make that possible by helping companies build innovation capabilities internally so they can benefit from the use of the process on their own. So we've created a few companies like that. We're very proud of that. And that's our future. We hope to do more of that.
That's so awesome. And I love hearing you talk about how a process, it's not something you can just kind of spit out. It takes time to grow it and evolve it and iterate on it to get it right. And, I believe in that fully. As you may know, and as a lot of the audience knows, I coach sales and SaaS founders to help them implement a sales process to be able to grow and scale. And that process, you're right, it didn't just kind of spark out of daylight. It's grown, it's evolved. I've learned new things, and I talk to other people, and I see other ways of doing things and see more data. Then it changes and it adjusts. So it sounds like that's what you guys are doing as well.
Exactly. And your ability to execute any process, is dependent on how good your process is. So if you don't have a good innovation process, you could be great at exercising that process, but it's going to come up short every time. And that's what we see in a lot of cases. There's so many situations where innovation is still a guessing game and thought of as an art versus a science.
Yeah, I bet that's very true. Going back, what gave you the idea to start Strategyn?
Well, prior to Strategyn, I worked at IBM for 10 years, and that's where I started my career. I have a manufacturing engineering degree background and a master's in business, and I started as a manufacturing engineer, and I worked on a product at IBM called the PC Junior. If you look up top marketing blunders of all time, it's in the top 5 or so. And the day after we introduced this product, which was IBM's entree into the home computer space, the headline in the Wall Street Journal read, "The PC Junior is a flop." And we thought, how did they know that so fast? Right? We just released the product yesterday, and today it's already a flop. The bad news was they were right. It took us about a year to come to grips with that. It cost us about $1 billion,
Ooh.
so making it one of the most expensive product failures ever.
Mm.
And this is what got me interested because I thought, how did they know that, right? Why didn't we know what metrics they were going to use to judge the value of our product when we were developing the product, right? Why did we have to wait until it was released and find out that day, right? And it got me thinking, is there a way to uh, understand customers and their needs? Can we do it in such a way that we can ensure our success in the marketplace? And as I started studying different techniques back then, like voice of the customer was starting to come out, and tools like conjoint analysis and QFD, and a whole series of things, Six Sigma, statistical process control, a lot of great things brewing at the time. But what I realized is that there really wasn't any comprehensive process for innovation and end to end. It was more like piecemeal. And in a lot of cases, it still is today. In other words, people are cobbling together a lot of incompatible concepts and solutions to try to excel at innovation. And the thought was, let's go create an end-to-end innovation process that mitigates the risk of failure. So I spent my last 5 years at IBM in the product planning ranks, thinking through how this might work, and stumbled across a couple of ideas that really gave birth to the Strategyn company and the process itself.
That's so cool. I love hearing that, how that kind of came to be. And it's so funny how many times I talk with people who've created something and have become successful, but came from struggle and came from a failure. And I'm sure you learned a lot from that.
Well, exactly, and I think that's failure, necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's the
Yeah.
way the saying goes, and it's true, right? And once you experience that, you can't unexperience that. Let's say it that way. It's very humbling. It's painful, and I poured a couple of years of my life into that product. I thought it was going to be the the world's best home computer. It seemed like a worthwhile mission, and it's all that's wiped away, right? So who wants that to happen? Right? We're all
Yeah, for
creative
sure.
people. We want to succeed at innovation. We don't want to work on failed products. So let's come up with a better way to ensure that the products that go into development are going to win in the market.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. So let's talk about jobs to be done. The jobs to be done theory for anyone out there who doesn't quite understand what that means and how it can be applied. Can you explain a bit about how that works?
Sure. So when I already mentioned, it would have been great if we could figure out what metrics people were going to use to judge the value of our products. And it occurred to me that um, in the manufacturing space, again, that's my background. When we work through a process, we try to measure and control um, certain aspects of the process to ensure predictable output. And what I thought, and I've seen this quote for years. You've seen it too. Thomas, the Theodore Levitt quote, which says, "We don't want the quarter-inch drill; we want the quarter-inch hole." That's been around since 1962. But one day it occurred to me that instead of studying the product that people are using, let's study what they're trying to do with the product. Let's study the process. And this is the way I thought about it. Let's study the underlying process they're trying to execute and figure out what we have to measure and control to produce a predictable output. Same concepts, right? But now it's customer facing as opposed to internal facing. So
Mhm.
somehow we would have to figure out how to go to customers and figure out to ask them, what metrics are you using to judge the value of the product when getting the job done? Well, that all turned out to be a very valid hypothesis. You can do exactly that. You can go study the jobs that people are trying to get done, break them down into their component parts, and figure out how they measure success along each step of the way. And it was in 1999 when I first met Clay Christensen and talked to him about our approach of outcome-driven innovation. And he really liked the idea of making the job the unit of analysis as opposed to the product. Because as soon as you start seeing everything through the lens of the job to be done, things become much more clear. And a few years later, he wrote his book, The Innovator's Solution, and he talked about this thinking as part of the innovator solution. And he coined the phrase "jobs be done." And that's he labeled it. He didn't even label it a theory at that point. He just talked about it in that light. But decades and a half later, it became a mainstream buzzword, and he really did a great job of popularizing the concept and the theory.
Very cool, and what a fun story. And I love that that line about we don't need a 1/4-inch drill, we need the 1/4-inch hole. And it's just a really simple way to be able to explain what we're trying to do and what the customer is trying to do. And I think it's really important for our audience, who is really a software heavy audience. We're trying to figure out not how do we make the competitors' products and make ours better, but how do we figure out what is the actual problem that they're trying to solve? What's the actual thing that the market is trying to do and accomplish? And what is the best way to be able to get that to happen? It's really, really critical to think from the customer's perspective, as you said. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss.
Well, I agree, and it's a simple mindset shift, but it's hard to make that shift because we're so used to seeing things through the drill maker's lens, right? We're a drill maker. Our product is drills. We compete against other drill makers. When we talk to customers, we talk about making better drills, right? But if you look through the world of innovation through the other lens, you realize that the hole maker wants to create a 1/4-inch hole. Any product that creates a 1/4-inch hole would be a competitor. So why not talk to them about the job of creating the 1/4-inch hole? And if we can understand how to do that, we can, in a solution agnostic or independent way, then we can come up with solutions that will get that job done better. So that's the essence of thinking. It's very simple at that level. It's just hard to do in practice.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And just in this exact analogy, instead of saying we need to make a better drill, you might say, hey, what if there was a new approach to this? And what if we came up with a laser that actually made a hole, and it was cheaper, faster, more accurate, and maybe safer than a drill, whatever you could come up with. And maybe that is the answer to the solution.
Well, it's exactly right. And we want to state the problem in such a way that it doesn't impede you from thinking of that solution, right? And
I love that.
If you go to customers and say, how do I make a better drill? You'll never come up with that, laser technology that could create the 1/4-inch hole in a much more effective way.
Yeah, that's amazing. ODI, outcome-driven innovation. What exactly does that mean, and how does that work?
Well, the whole concept is tied back to those metrics that people are using to judge the value of the products. The metrics they use to measure success when getting a job done. Those metrics are the customer's desired outcomes. So like when you're cooking a meal, for example, you want to minimize the likelihood of overcooking the food or undercooking the food, or minimize the time it takes to complete the cooking of the food. There's a whole series of metrics that you'd use. Many of these are subconscious, but you think through them. I mean, as I said those, I'm sure they resonate. You go, sure, yeah, we want to make sure those things happen as we get that job done. It turns out there's roughly anywhere between 50 and 150 different metrics that people use to measure success when getting a job done for any given job. So, and again, we call those outcome statements. So the whole goal is to understand the job at this very granular level and understand all the outcomes that customers are trying to achieve as they go about and get a job done. And if you think about it like this, people buy products and services to get a job done. Well, if that's the case, a winning product will get the job done better. All right. So what is better? Well, better means faster. It means more predictably. It means higher output throughput. That's true of any process, right? Those are the three things that you look at. It's got to be quick. You can automate it potentially and get it done fast, but that doesn't mean it's predictable. It could be fast, but be crazily unpredictable and give you bad results every time. So it's got to be predictable. But fast and predictable is not enough either, right? It could be fast and predictable and be wrong 100% of the time. So we need all three. And the thought was, let's define these outcome statements around getting the job done better. So along these unique perspectives. And by coming up with a set of outcomes that define what better means to the customer, we can quite literally figure out which of these needs are important to customers not well satisfied by today's solutions, meaning these are great opportunities to get the job done better, or they pinpoint statistically where customers are struggling to get the job done.
Mm.
If you have that information before we go sit down and conceptualize a new product, we can quite literally build a product around the metrics people are going to use to judge the value of the product, right? Because the unmet needs of today represent the breakthrough products of tomorrow, right? So if we know what the opportunities are today and we create a solution that will address them specifically, and we know it will address those outcomes, then we know that we have a winning product. And this is the reversal, right? We're trying to flip innovation on its head, right? Instead of coming up with ideas and then going through this iterative process to see, do they meet needs? Oh, we need to refine it. Let's come back. Now we made some adjustments. Let's go test it again. Now, did we better satisfy needs? That's a very slow, inexpensive way of understanding customer needs, right? And the problem with that approach is you may never know all the customer's needs, and you may never know which needs are unmet. And you may pick off one or two here or there and start making incremental improvements, but you never have the big breakthrough because there might be 25 unmet needs there. You just don't know which ones they are. So you're just picking off one at a time as you discover them. And it looks like you're just a Me Too product trying to break into a mature space. This is why we recommend to a lot of our software clients that, if you want to break into a space, you got to get the job done significantly better. What does that mean? It means you got to get the job done about 15% better at a minimum than competing solutions. That's the threshold we've determined. Again, if you know where all the people are struggling to get the job done, and there are 25 unmet needs that you could address to get the job done better, go address all 25 of them, right? Not one or two of them. Don't go out with an incremental improvement. If you know where all the value lies, go create value across a much bigger space and come up with the breakthrough. This is how we helped Kroll OnTrack enter the electronic evidence discovery business. They had a technology that allowed them to extract data off a hard drive. They were in the data recovery business. And they thought, wow, let's apply this in the legal space for this area of electronic evidence discovery in case there's a lawsuit and companies have to go get all the data as part of the discovery process and give it to the legal team. They failed in their first two attempts. And the reason is, even though they could extract the data off the hard drive, they didn't realize that the customer was the legal team. They thought it was the IT people and the companies that they were taking the data from. And what we helped them realize is, no, they're just helping you support your product, but your customer is actually the legal team, and the job they're trying to get done is to find evidence or data that would support or refute a case. And once they did that, they not only took the data off the hard drive, but they made it searchable. So the legal teams could quite literally go through it and find information that would support or refute a case. Wow. That's what led them to be. They were in the Gartner Magic Quadrants as a market leader for good 15 plus years. And what we showed them is that there were about 60 unmet needs in the market, and their first iteration of the product addressed about 25 of them. So it was a significant improvement over what people were currently doing. But the beauty of that is not only were they successful as an entrant into that business, but they knew exactly where to go for the next iteration of the product and the one after that. They just went down the list. Here's our next top 10 needs. Here's the next top 10 unmet needs, and so on until they got the job done perfectly. And what that did is it made it really hard for competitors to come up behind them and take over the space, because they were quite literally on the most efficient path to growth, is the way I like saying that, right? Like if you know in priority order, what percent of needs are the most underserved across the biggest customer population, and you just start knocking them off in order, you're creating value in the most efficient way possible. And it's going to be really hard for anyone to do better than you because you're already on the most efficient path to growth. So, they came back to us about 10 years later for a refresh of the data. And they said, okay, we made it through all those opportunities. Wow. I think we're getting the job done pretty well. What do we do now?
Well, it's so cool to see such a great success story like that. And I love the story about the fact that they were kind of focusing on the wrong customer, the wrong prospect. Obviously, you have different role types within each company. And this is something that I teach to my clients as well. I mean, yes, for product development, you absolutely need to know who the end user is going to be, not the IT, the lawyers. But also in sales, you need to be able to show them and explain the way that they want to hear it and what's important to them. I talk a lot about how, hey, the users of the product might want something different than the CEO or the IT team, and they're all looking at it in different ways, and it's solving different things for each of them. CEO wants reports and overall efficiency, and each person wants to not be at their job 10 hours a day and spending too much time being away from their family. The IT person wants something that's easy to implement and links with all their other systems. And it's kind of funny how it's the same way with job to be done, that you need to focus on, the real end user, end buyer.
Yeah, and we call that person the job executor. And this is one of the things that we see people stumble with. They get the customers wrong. Especially in B2B, it's even more complicated because there's 3 categories of customers, the way we like thinking about it. The person who's the job executor, they're actually using the product to get a job done. Then there's the people who support the product. They may have to install it and set it up and upgrade it. And then there's the people who buy the product. And they could be 3 different groups of people, and they have needs coming from different perspectives, right? The buyer looks at needs through a financial lens and a high-level performance lens. The job executor is looking at the very precise things and how am I going to get that job done? So depending on what you're trying to do, you would focus on one of those different customers. So for example, if you're trying to create a better product, then you go talk to the job executor because they know the job they're trying to get done, and you need those inputs to create a better product. If you want to make the installation process easier, well, go talk to the installer, right? And talk about the job of installing the product. But people aren't buying the product to install it, right? They're buying it to get that core job done. So it's important to start over in that area. And then, of course, the buyer's trying to get their job done too. And by understanding that, you can put together a better go-to-market strategy. So, it fills in all those different gaps. And I think one of the nice advantages of outcome-driven innovation is that you can use the same process and apply it in each of those situations, because it's always define the group of people and the job to be done, define the metrics or their needs, the metrics they use to measure success when getting the job done, figure out which of those needs are unmet. We do that through quantitative research, and determine if there are segments of people with different unmet needs. We do that quantitatively as well. And with all that input, then you can decide, how do I better position my current product, or how do I improve my current product, or how to create a brand new product in the space that will get the job done 15 or 20% better or more, so I can win as a new entrant into the market.
Yeah, I love that. What advice, Tony, would you have for software leaders who are wanting to apply some of this information and wanting to know more about how their customers are needing to solve their problems? What should people listening take away from this?
Well, I think the very first thing, if nothing else, just define the market correctly. And
super important.
Now, the reason I say that is, in many innovation processes, there is no market definition step. And in fact, we've done a lot of research that says on 70% of all product teams, they don't even agree on the way to best define their market. That's a problem, right? And if you look at the lean startup approach, for example, there is no market definition step. And as a result, they hypothesize a market, a product, and the value proposition all up front before they go out and do customer discovery. So as they're iterating, they're iterating on the market, the product, and the value proposition all at the same time. It becomes this recursive process that makes it very difficult to exit because there's no constant in the equation, right? And what I mean by that is, define the market, make it a constant in the equation. And the way we define a market is a group of people and the job they're trying to get done. It's the legal team who's trying to find information that supports or refutes a case, right? Once you agree that that's the market you're going after, like Kroll On-Track did, the rest starts falling in place, right? If you think you're helping the IT department strip data off a hard drive, that's the wrong market, right? You've missed the boat. So
Mhm.
just getting that part right allows you to then use that as a constant in the equation, if you will, and then you can just go talk to legal teams and ask them about how they measure success as they go about finding information that would support or refute a case. And they know that, right? So now you can lay out all the outcomes they use to measure success along each step of the way. And now you have the inputs to go execute your process. So I think just getting started and getting on the right foot goes a long way. We also have a tool called the Job Map, which came out of an article that was published in HBR back in 2008, where we recommended that you break down the job, much like you'd break down a process, into its job steps. But the difference is it's not a process map. In other words, it's not laying out what customers are doing. It lays out what they're trying to do.
Hmm.
Now, this is important because you could have a group of people all getting the same job done, but they may be doing it in 20 different ways. They may be using 20 different products. If you were to create a process map, you'd lay out what they're doing. You'd end up with 20 process maps. We're trying to go a step beyond that and say, it's not about what they're doing, because that's in solution space. Through through the whole maker's lens, let's go into problem space, right? Let's look at what they're trying to do when they're creating that quarter inch hole. Let's not talk about, they got their drill and they put it in this way and they cranked it down to make sure it doesn't fall out. That's what they're doing. But what are they trying to do, right? And that tool in and of itself becomes extraordinarily helpful for plotting out a company's future, because people buy products to get a job done. If you know what the entire job is, you can use that insight to work over the years to help customers get the entire job done. What we typically see, especially in the software space, is that they only get parts of the job done. Many products get only parts of the job done, and the customer's left to cobble together solutions to get the entire job done. And it's often the case that those solutions are incompatible, and then the customer has to be the interlink, the interface between all these disparate solutions. All right. So overcoming that is of course a breakthrough with an innovative product as well.
For sure. For sure. Wow. This has been so much fun, Tony. There's so much information here. I cannot wait to go back and have a re-listen to this. And I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. But I want to make sure everybody can connect with you and learn more about what you and what Strategyn are doing. Where best can our audience learn more about you and what you guys are doing?
Well, our website at strategyn.com is a great location. I have a free audio book and ebook at jobstobedonebook.com with hyphens in between each. And that's a great resource. Brings you up to speed on much of the latest thinking. And I have a Medium site too at jobstobedone.com that lays out a bunch of articles and offers some of my disparate thoughts here and there on a variety of topics.
Okay, perfect. And we'll put all that into the show notes as well. So if you're listening on the podcast, you'll be able to hear or get all those links and go check all this stuff out, because it's really fascinating. It's really cool, and it really can help a business move forward. But Tony, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Matt, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for everybody out there, thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit the subscribe button right now. That way you're not going to miss out on any other amazing leaders like Tony. You're not going to miss out on any of their experiences and their expertise, so that you can move forward and get ahead. So thank you very much for coming, and we will see you next time. Take care.